Geert, I was reading a blog post and that talked about developer experience, or it was shorthanded like DevX. So, do you know anything about that new kid on the block?
Yeah, it's just DevOps again in another flavor, I think. Just like all the things that we hear, platform engineering, all those things that help you build better software with specific focuses, which, in my opinion, DevOps already should entail. But it's focusing on certain things. But I'm not an expert on it, so let's invite a guest who knows more about this and went through a journey of implementing this at their company.
I think I know someone. Let's do that.
Okay, let's get going.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So, welcome to the Lead Podcast, and we are back. My name is René, and I'm here with Geert. So, we also have our guest in the middle that is hopefully going to explain a little bit more about this developer experience thing, and that is my good friend Rasmus Hald. And he works at Lego, and he has a very fancy title, but I think that he can explain that better himself. So, welcome, Rasmus, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, both of you. It's a true pleasure to be here. Okay, fancy title. I don't know if I can live up to that, but I'll give it a go. So true, I work at the Lego Group. We make fantastic products that are kids of all sizes. And my job is to head up developer experience and cloud foundation. So it's the two things I am engaged and excited about. It's how we can make developers productive with tools, practices, platforms, etc. And then I'm also quite keen on cloud and how cloud can bring business agility so we can innovate at the speed we need to. It's basically what we do, right?
Yeah.
So I work at the Lego Group. I have an amazing team of highly skilled engineers, and I deliver a number of digital products. So the Lego Group, many probably don't know that we don't have an IT department. We have decomposed that into digital products. And the Lego Group has about 220 digital products, where in some of them you have the classic IT disciplines, like physical compute, cloud enablement. And I also have the many of the products that looks after developer experience. So yes, first-hand experience with this today. But actually, in my past, I used to work for a small company, Danish company called Maersk. They move stuff about a big portion of everything that's moved on the ocean. And before that, I actually worked in a team called Developer Experience at Microsoft, the big software giant, right? So I've been probably doing developer experience before
it existed.
It is what it is today, right? But let's discuss that.
Let's discuss that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was wondering, Rasmus, is that you mentioned it in your introduction on developer experience as part of a whole, but let's make this clear. So developer experience, is that the same thing as developer productivity? Because managers would always love to talk about developer productivity and then intermix that with developer experience. But my feeling is that is not the same thing, right?
No, I would say developer experience is something we give to each other, where developer productivity can be the value you get, right? So I think it depends if you are in the giving end or in the receiving end. I think the overarching, if we talk about the why, and I appreciate talking about the why, because another buzzword to add to your vocabulary, Kat, is value engineering.
Value engineering.
Which there's many articles about, but let's not touch on that today. But the why, let's talk about the why for a second, right? And developer productivity is an outcome, but this is really about removing waste in the software delivery process. So how do we do that, right? So when you are in the size of the Lego group, you have 220 product teams. Maybe there's some things we can do once that has the benefit of all, right? So would you rather have every team buying their own GitHub account and setting it up, or can we do that once and for all? Make really great integrations, onboarding, and configuration, and then that becomes a good experience, right? That's a developer experience, but maybe less so on the individual tooling, but more in the integration of such, right?
So to get things straight, looking at those 200 plus teams, some of them are really focusing on working on the end products that the customers use.
Yes.
And there are several teams that work on platforms or tools that those teams can use, or even multiple layers of teams could use to make their work easier.
Yes, exactly. So we are very inspired by the literature in team topologies. If you are unaware of that book, I recommend visiting it. It's really good for how you organize what we call stream-aligned team, which is the one directly facing the end consumer. So that might, in our case, it's building the Lego Builder app, for example, which is really cool. Digital and instruction for building as a family, or having a story-based building experience with our products, right? But that's a digital product. It's stream-aligned, so it's consumer-facing, where you can say my products. In my portfolio of products, there's a Kubernetes platform. That needs to have a really good developer experience to make sure that onboarding, using, etc., is designed for the developer, not for IT, not for anything else, right? It's the developer that consumes it, and then the value becomes the productivity we discussed before.
Yeah, and the developer also doesn't want to think about all those different layers, etc. Right? Running a Kubernetes cluster alone is quite a burden for a team, right? So if you have to do all those things yourself, but you don't have time to work on the actual product itself and deliver value to your end customer.
But what I was wondering is that so I saw some developer platforms like I don't know, Backstage is used often by the product, open source product from Spotify, or companies build their own self-service enablement portals. I can mention a few of those, but I think the main topic of these things is how do you actually onboard teams there, and how do you scale this developer platform thing? Because onboarding 1 or 2 or 3 teams, that might be okay, but scaling it and being aware that there is these things to 230 teams, how do you do that? How do you look at that?
Yeah. I think you're onto something, but if I can just take us back one step, because yes, developer portals, I like to call them, are very hot right now. For me, developer platform is an opinionated platform like Kubernetes, where you just shoot your container to, and then someone else takes care of it. Not so much DevOps in my book, for my taste, but it still scales very well, especially if you are outsourced IT. Then Dev and Ops is separate, right? Anyways, let's come back to developer experience. Here, developer portals are really getting traction now, because if we look a little bit about the research that we have done internally, and also read research that other companies, also pure digital companies like Spotify, have shared, what we found was that, yes, we have great tooling, right? We also have too much tooling like many other companies, but we have great tooling for our developers. But developers still struggle with finding stuff. That is the number one pain we experienced when we did our first study earlier this year, was finding stuff and then using stuff next. Okay, so it wasn't that we didn't have the right tools. We thought that in the beginning. That wasn't the point. It was finding what we had and then figuring out how we use it. So we have addressed that, and we call the first one, finding stuff, is discoverability. So how do I discover what I need to find? And it might be that I know I need a GitHub account, or it might be that I think I need a source code repository. So we both need to address both, right?
Yeah.
And developer portals are specifically awesome at addressing this concern, because if you can give a home for engineers that they go to find stuff. So sort of it's not going to be a single pane of glass, because I've seen way too many sales slides for that phrase, right? But let's not call it that. But I think you can follow my train of thought.
Yeah, it's one entry point where you can start your search.
Yes. So here can be a tools catalog. In our case, we call it capabilities, because it can be tools, platforms, whatever, right? So what are our internal capabilities that supports the developer? Here we host the documentation. Here we give you an overview of your assets. So we know exactly what product has which applications. We know exactly what code repositories belongs to this digital product. We know exactly their pipelines. We know exactly the team that's working on it. We can get all this with data, and we can just make it super easy to discover, and therefore address the discoverability issue we had.
Yeah, cool. And does that also apply for example, finding a tool to I don't know, do license scanning, or do we have that tool? And where do I get that tool? And why do I find that tool? And how do I get a license for that tool? And all that stuff.
Yes.
It's also there in that developer portal.
Yes. So this is I like to describe it as a shopping mall.
Yeah.
So in my organization, there's a team that looks after tools and developer platforms. So like Geert and vulnerability management and all that stuff, right? There's another team that owns the Kubernetes platform. There's a third team that owns the Backstage developer port, right? But for everyone, the storefront is the developer portal. That's where you go to find, I need a cloud account, for example. Okay, I can pick between Google, Azure, AWS. Okay, which is good for what, right? This one has, there can be some documentation that helps you. Well, I need to integrate with these data sources. Okay, you should place your cloud architecture over here.
Nice.
So you just go and find it. But once you have created that capability, for example, a cloud account, you can also go, it will automatically be associated to your digital product. And you can go and discover your digital product and all the assets that is there.
Yeah,
so we're also starting to automatically document the relationship between components, right?
Yeah, so it's really a fine balance between people having the capabilities of doing things themselves, but then, well, finding the right stuff that they need in the shopping mall, right? So it's not all the stuff is enforced on them, which I also see a lot in more traditional companies. Like, this is the only way we do certain things, make it work in this way, which we all know that doesn't work. And well, if we talk about developer experience, that often leads into really bad developer experience and unhappy developers, etc. So giving that freedom is something that I really like.
Yeah. But then also raises the question, I think, that if you give that freedom and the teams can do whatever they like, they are not forced into a certain thing. I think the valid question that is also asked by maybe higher management or also maybe product owners, is it worth it? So how do you measure this developer experience? Because it's great that you have all these tools and people can find stuff, but yeah, what is the value? Can you measure that and how?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, and I have to be honest, we have struggled with this as well. So, but I will share how far we are, and maybe I can come back in a half a year and tell you if it worked.
Sure.
But it has been difficult to articulate the value, and we are probably now third iteration of this, because I have to admit, for me, it was a gut feeling. I told you I've been in other companies before, so I've tried before. So it was a gut feeling backed by experience. But still, we decided to invest in in addressing discoverability with the developer portal. And right now we are measuring waste removed, we call it. So the metric we use is improve flow for software developers by removing waste in the delivery something, right? And then we measure time saved. And there's then a hypothesis behind each developer workflow. So it can be, I need to create a cloud account. Then how much time would a developer spend if they had a credit card and they had to do the same process as you can now go and click, I would like a new AWS account, and it gets provisioned to you with all the guardrails that we have decided to have in place, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for if you need a source code repository, vulnerability management. We can now calculate how much waste have we removed by automating all that with integrations. And then we times that up with adoption, right? So if I have 200 product teams on GitHub, and that saves per product team 19 hours per month. I'm making up stuff now. Then it's 200 times 19 hours. That's the value.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it's nice to make it really quantitative. That gives those teams also the idea that what they're working on is actually valuable, right? Because that's what I often see in those. I see a lot of companies working on platform teams, and they're building stuff that other teams can use. And I've seen several companies that have these nice shiny platforms that are there and nobody is using it, or they're only using it because they're enforced to use it. But if you really measure this, then they will also start improving the actual stuff that they created, right? They will improve the portal of how can we save even more time, or really work that product as an actual end user product as well, right? I think you should focus on it at the same way as you do with your end customer software.
Absolutely. It requires that you have a critical mass in your developer population, right? If you are an organization of 5 developers, then you're more like a startup. You just do everything yourself, right?
Yeah.
But in the Lego group, we have 1,600 plus engineers, software developers. So we have a critical mass. We also have a very strong desire to be successful in digital. And therefore, for us, it's an obvious good investment.
Nice.
Now, we have touched on discoverability, right? The discoverability issue. We have touched on the value. There's another one I want to bring up as difficult, and that is the too many unknowns. Spotify also talks about it in their public research, and we have experienced the same, is that for an engineer with in an organization like ours, where there's a high degree of empowerment in the product teams, there's simply too many unknowns, right? What do I need to build with? I need a stateful web app. What do I need to build with, right? What's my backend? What's my front end? Well, I can do Kubernetes, serverless, all kinds of things. There's 100 solutions that does the same. And these too many unknowns you get when you have highly empowered organizations, it is also actually wasteful. So how can we provide good guidance? And that's where documentation comes in. And now, I don't know about you, but I have seen my share of good documentation and less good documentation. So how do we go about that? And I think there's, for us, that is the next frontier, if I can be honest about this. So how do we bring it up, right? Should we bring in some technical writers that lifts the quality? Should we just push more for having just a basic documentation of how to build with components, right? We have
is this something that generative AI is also going to take a role in? Because, well, writing documentation, I think, especially AI is really good at that.
And I know we were joking before, but we can't discuss this topic without talking about generative AI.
Yeah.
So what we have done as an experiment, and this is totally sandboxed and everything, But actually, we have leveraged a technology called OpenAI, which is really cool, right? You probably know the public version from ChatGPT. And what we can then provide for OpenAI is the context of our documentation for developers.
Mhm.
And right now, in our developer portal, anywhere you are, no matter what action you add, you can call forward the chat AI, and it knows your context you're in. It knows what documentation is relevant, regardless of how poor it is. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's factual, it can fill in the gaps, and you can now have a conversation, right? So if you're browsing an API, you can ask, what does this API do?
Yeah.
Okay. And if it's too long, you can ask it to summarize. How do I call this API, right? How do I get access to it? It will answer it based on the documentation that is available.
That's awesome.
So I think you're onto something, right? Because the whole documentation journey is completely gonna change, right? Both from what GitHub Copilot X can do today, that writes the documentation for you based on the code, but then a generative AI can also consume that as documentation, and then in a conversational setting, tell the engineer exactly what they need to do.
Yeah. I think
to leverage it, right?
The challenge is still, of course, ChatGPT or OpenAI can generate everything, also a lot of crap.
Yes.
But I think like the technical writer, or like at least good documentation, is still like it's the source of what is being generated. So it doesn't have to be in a format that is totally awesome, but at least the facts need to be there in a way that it can be consumed and read. So I think the challenge will still be, first, who is going to write the documentation / who is going to decide what is in there. So if you say there are 100 solutions, and that leads also to a lot of, maybe waste, who is going to decide which solutions are going to be described and which not? And the second one is, how are you going to keep up? Because the solution of a year ago is not the solution in a year from now. So it's like the challenge of any documentation is still there, regardless of GPT or whatever. And I think, is there any idea how you're going to challenge that? Or
absolutely, yeah. And I think the popular word right these days is prompt engineering, but I can try to put a few more words on it, right? Because I see Gen AI as being something that supports humans and not replaces humans. So if I am the creator of something, regardless if it's documentation or code or a document or reporting, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's still my output, and I need to be responsible for the output. However, you might have noticed that I am bilingual, so my native tongue is Danish, but my business language is English. I am proficient in English, but not as quick as I would be in Danish, for example. Now, Gen AI actually gives me that. I am, with Gen AI, much more proficient in and much more precise, and probably also easier to consume my written English with Gen AI, because it just gives me that edge, but I still own the output, right? So I think with good prompt engineering, you get rid of the falsehood that when it makes up shit, and you need as a person using this tool to read and understand the output and still put your name on it, right? So it's your professional integrity that gives an output. And the same comes with coding, right? So I call that prompt engineering, right? So you work with what you get back from the prompt. You just don't send it forward as being gospel, but you still put your name and your professionalism behind it.
Yeah, I think it would be also really cool if you would connect the whole developer portal experience towards this Gen AI, so it can also point you in the right directions there. Like if you want to create something using the portal, you can do that. It can point you in the right direction using the conversation, so it can guide you through the conversation of building your whole application, basically, of, oh, I first need a cloud account. Well, you can do that here, and then, oh, now I need some code, okay, and then it can guide you through the whole process, right?
Yeah,
And
user interface is going to be completely different. Who needs buttons and menus if you can have a conversation, right?
Yes.
So,
until
and
it can
for
actually
now,
do the steps for you, right? So
yeah.
you only have to describe
for
what you
now,
want to
and
do.
for now, you're writing, right? You're using a prompt, but there's nothing preventing us from just talking,
Yeah, true.
talking to the computer, right? So I think I think we will see dramatic changes in how we consume documentation within software development. I have noticed that some of our big suppliers have changed strategy where they have been very written and video based in their documentation previously. They are now pivoting towards integrating the documentation into the conversational AI. So when you're developing against, for example, a specific cloud, you will probably get a conversational AI assistant that walks you through the process rather than having to go and read a doc site, for example.
Before we take off the lid of AI and all this stuff completely, then we have a podcast of 24 hours, I think. So I think that we should move a little
bit back to
developer experience, and then also a little bit towards the end already. And that is more like, so what listeners that do not have any experience yet with developer experience, or just get started, or just get into this topic, so what can you give them? Like what are the takeaways for them? Like, okay, get started with this, read this, or do that.
Yeah, I think first step was also where we started, right? Are you in the right organization where it's value to give developer experience? And that's back to team topologies. That book there is that's a good place to start, because I think you need to have the concept of streamline teams and platform teams and enabling teams. If you have that in place, in large scale or small scale, it doesn't matter, then you're good to go, right? Then you have an organization that can receive developer experience and get the value. Then I would say there's some things you need to trust your gut, especially if you've been in that organization for a while. You know what is needed, but you need to add in research of some sort. You need some kind of feedback loop, because you might be thinking like I did 2 years ago when I just joined this, that we just need more good tooling, right? But quickly we learned that's not necessarily what we need, right? We need to be much more nuanced in our approach. And therefore, good research, if you are fortunate to have UX researchers around or professional researchers, then you can make qualitative research, so interviews. You could also do that yourself, but also quantitative research, so just surveys, basically. Figure out what is the pains here, reflect on those pains, talk to your Gen AI about it, what you're finding. But then you will start addressing the actual pains of the organization. And they might not be what you apparently think it is, or your colleagues think it is, or the most vocal in your organization says it is, right? So become much more based on your feedback loops, and make sure you close the feedback loops by newsletters or posts where the developers go and read, so that you show that you are giving value back. Then you become the hero, right? The enabler, rather than what can often be an IT department mindset, right? So you're just telling us how we should do our job, which is not where we want to go.
I really like the factual checking that you did. Like creating a cloud account would normally take a developer like an hour if they had a credit card. And now they can use a developer portal to do that in 5 minutes. So we save 55 minutes for each one, right? So if you start measuring this, and that you can do that with very, very small organizations already. If we create some automation for it, just measure, well, we created 25 accounts this week. That's 25 hours saved already, right? So all those small statistics are really good insights and really focus on the value that you deliver as those teams. So that's what I really like about your pitch.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to append. It just makes the conversation so much easier when you can. I think our last round was that we say you can take this with a grain of salt, but in the magnitude of 250 the developer in all our product teams, right? But we're also in a different scale, right? 220 product teams. But if they had to do their own developer experience, we would need to hire 270 more engineers.
Wow.
And I don't know where we will fit them, to be honest. But
No,
we will find them.
but you're saving more than one developer per team, basically.
Yes.
Which is quite a nice number.
Quite a nice number. So I think, you inspired me a lot. You gave all these little nudges and hints that makes me think as well. I liked a lot of your talk. I'm definitely going to watch the recording again and write some of these things down. So thank you very much, Rasmus. It was a pleasure to have you again on the show. And I think that we need to meet up again in half a year or something and see where you are at. And then probably it's totally different. But then we will learn that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And in the several episodes, you will see Rasmus again, I presume. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pure joy to talk to you today. Maybe we can round off and see if AI have taken our jobs in another 6 months. A true pleasure to be here. And I hope this inspired people just to be curious on what developer experience can do for your company.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah, let's leave it with that. Thank you, Rasmus. Thank you, René, for this episode again. And thank you, listeners, for listening to our podcast again. Hopefully to see or speak to you again in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.